Commander Zethkar Voss stood on the bridge of his warship and looked at the stars through the big window. His red shell had scars from many fights, and his forearms were strong from holding weapons for 30 years. He was the best fighter in the Kithari Empire, and everyone knew his name. In 17 big battles across 3 star systems, he had never lost once. The Kithari were born warriors. Their home planet was hot and dry, with big mountains and wide deserts. They grew up learning to fight, and their bodies were made for war. Zethkar was taller than most humans, with thick armor on his skin and eyes that could see in the dark. His people had ruled space for 1,000 years, and no one could beat them in battle. Today felt different, though. A message had come from the Galactic Council about some new race that wanted to join them. They called themselves humans, and they came from a small blue world called Earth. Zethkar had seen many new races try to join the Council before. Most of them were weak and needed protection from stronger races like his own. His assistant, a young Kethari named Daltok, brought him the data pad with information about these humans. Zethkar looked at the pictures and numbers with his lower 2 eyes, while his upper eyes watched the stars. The humans were small and soft-looking, with only 2 arms and 2 legs. Their skin was pink and looked like it would tear easily. They had no natural armor or claws or anything that looked dangerous. Their ships were simple and gray, made of basic metal with no style or beauty. The Kethari ships were works of art, with curved lines and shining armor that could stop any weapon. These human ships looked like boxes with engines stuck on the back. Their weapons were basic, too, just simple energy beams and metal bullets. Nothing like the plasma cannons and gravity bombs that real warriors used. The Council had asked Zethkar to test these humans and see if they were ready to join the galactic community. It was supposed to be easy work. He would show them how real fighting was done, they would fail badly, and then he would write a report saying they needed many years of training before they could be useful. Maybe they could carry supplies or do simple jobs while the real warriors protected them. Zethkar had done this job many times before. The Veltari had been the last new race, and they had lasted exactly 12 minutes in their first battle test. Before that, the Quintos had managed 20 minutes, but only because they ran away very fast. No new race had ever impressed him, or shown that they understood what real war was like. The message said that Captain Jake Morrison would be the human leader for this test. Zethkar tried to say the name, but it sounded strange in his mouth. Human names were short and simple, not like proper Kethari names that told stories of great battles and honored ancestors. This Jake Morrison was probably just another soft creature who thought war was like the games children played. Daltok pointed to one part of the report that seemed odd. The humans had been fighting wars on their own planet for thousands of years, longer than most races had even known about fire. But when Zethkar looked at their weapons and ships, everything seemed so basic. How could a race that fought so much be so far behind in technology? It made no sense. Maybe they were just very stupid and never learned to make better weapons. Some races were like that, always fighting with sticks and rocks, while smarter races built ships that could cross between stars. The humans had somehow learned to travel in space, but they still used primitive weapons that would have been old-fashioned 100 years ago. Zethkar closed the data pad and walked to his command chair. His ship, the Crimson Talon, was the most feared vessel in the fleet. It had weapons that could destroy a moon and armor that had never been broken. The humans would take one look at it and understand how outmatched they were. Then this whole test would be over quickly. He called his crew to prepare for the meeting. They would travel to a neutral station where the humans were waiting. Zethkar planned to be polite but firm. He would show them a few basic fighting moves, let them try their simple weapons against some practice targets, and then explain why they were not ready for real military work. The whole thing should take maybe 2 days, and then he could go back to important duties. The stars moved past his window as the ship turned toward its destination. Somewhere out there, these humans were probably getting excited about meeting a real warrior. They had no idea what they were about to learn about. The difference between playing at war and actually being good at it. The meeting station was small and basic, just like everything else about these humans. Zethkar walked through the docking tube and stepped onto the human ship called Independence. The first thing he noticed was how everything looked so simple and plain. The walls were gray metal with no decorations, and the lights were bright white instead of the warm colors that civilized races used. Captain Jake Morrison was waiting for him in the docking bay. The human was even smaller than the pictures had shown, barely reaching up to Zethkar's chest. His skin was pale and soft-looking, and he had hair on top of his head that was brown like dirt. He wore a simple uniform that was clean but had no style or beauty to it. When he saw Zethkar, he made a gesture with his hand near his forehead and smiled with his mouth. "Welcome aboard, Commander Voss," Morrison said through a small device that changed his words into Kethari language. "We are honored to have someone of your experience evaluate our capabilities." Zethkar's mouth parts clicked together in what humans would later learn meant he found something funny. This tiny creature thought he was honoring a great warrior by letting him onto this simple ship. It was like a child offering to show a master craftsman how to play with toys. The human captain took him on a tour of the ship, and everything Zethkar saw made him more sure that this would be very easy. The engine room was small and used old fusion technology that the Kethari had stopped using 50 years ago. The weapons were basic energy cannons that could barely damage a real warship's shields. The crew quarters were tiny boxes where the humans slept on flatbeds instead of proper rest pods. Morrison introduced him to his officers as they walked through the ship. Lieutenant Amy Carter was in charge of tactics and planning. She was even smaller than Morrison, with yellow hair and green eyes that looked at everything very carefully. She showed Zethkar their computer systems with obvious pride, explaining how they could track multiple targets and calculate firing solutions. The computers were so simple that Zethkar's personal data pad had more power than their main battle computer. Dr. Lisa Morgan was their science officer and diplomat. She had dark hair and brown skin, and she asked many questions about Kethari, culture, and military history. She seemed very interested in learning, but her questions showed how little humans understood about real warfare. She asked about honor codes and rules of battle, as if war was some kind of game with fair play and proper behavior. Sergeant Rick Davis was in charge of the ship's Marines. He was bigger than the other humans, with muscles that showed under his uniform and scars on his hands from fighting. His eyes were hard and cold, and when he looked at Zethkar, it felt like he was measuring him for a fight. Davis showed him the Marine equipment, which was just basic body armor and simple projectile weapons that shot metal bullets. The armor looked like it might stop a knife, but nothing more serious. The weapons demonstration was exactly what Zethkar expected. The humans fired their guns at targets and hit them accurately, but the weapons were so weak that they would barely scratch Kethari battle armor. Their energy cannons could burn through thin metal, but a real warship's shields would laugh at such pathetic power. The Marines showed some fighting moves that were adequate for creatures with only 2 arms, but nothing that would work against a trained Kethari warrior. Lieutenant Carter presented their tactical doctrine with enthusiasm, showing charts and diagrams of how they planned battles. She talked about things like asymmetric warfare and adaptive tactics, which sounded like fancy words for admitting you were too weak to fight properly. Real warriors met their enemies head-on with superior firepower and better training, not with clever tricks and running away. Dr. Morgan tried to explain human military philosophy, speaking about concepts that made no sense to a real soldier. She talked about winning hearts and minds, about proportional response and minimizing civilian casualties. War was about destroying your enemies completely so they could never threaten you again. These humans seemed to think it was about being polite and making everyone happy. Morrison asked what Zethkar thought of their capabilities so far. The commander tried to be diplomatic because the Galactic Council wanted him to be respectful to potential new members. "Your species shows promise," he said carefully. "With proper guidance from more advanced civilizations, humans might one day contribute meaningfully to galactic security." He saw something change in Morrison's eyes for just a moment, like a flash of fire. But then the human smiled and nodded politely. "Perhaps we could arrange a joint exercise, Commander. Nothing too challenging. Maybe a response to a pirate incursion." "An excellent idea," Zethkar agreed. "It would be good to show these humans what real military might look like. His own battlecruiser could handle any pirate fleet by itself, and watching him work would teach the humans valuable lessons about proper warfare." The exercise was planned for the next week in a system that had been having trouble with raiders from the Korath Syndicate. Intelligence reports said there were maybe 6 enemy ships, nothing that would present any real danger. It would be perfect for showing the humans how a real warrior solved problems. As they finished the tour and prepared for departure, Zethkar noticed something strange. The humans were not just getting ready for a simple training exercise. Supply ships were loading huge amounts of ammunition onto their vessels, far more than would be needed for fighting 6 pirates. Engineers were working day and night to upgrade systems and check every piece of equipment. The Marines were practicing combat moves with an intensity that seemed excessive for what should be an easy mission. When he asked Dr. Morgan about the activity, she just smiled and said that humans had a saying about preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. She said it was just their nature to be thorough. Zethkar thought it was another example of human worry and fear. They would learn to be more efficient once they saw how proper warriors handled things. The joint task force dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Nexus system, and immediately Zethkar knew something was very wrong. His ship's sensors started counting enemy vessels, and the numbers kept climbing. 6 pirates had become 12, then 20, then 30. The final count showed 34 enemy ships scattered throughout the system, including several that looked like captured military vessels from other races. What intelligence had described as a minor pirate problem was actually a full invasion fleet. The Korath Syndicate had apparently decided to make this system their main base of operations, and they had brought everything they owned to defend it. Zethkar had fought pirate fleets before, but never one this large or well-organized. "Admiral." Kevin Brooks appeared on the communication screen from his flagship. The human looked completely calm as he read the sensor reports, as if finding 6 times more enemies than expected was just a minor inconvenience. He was older than Morrison, with gray hair and lines on his face that spoke of many years in command. His voice was steady as he asked for recommendations from his tactical staff. Lieutenant Carter's voice came over the communication channel, clear and professional as she analyzed the situation. "Standard doctrine suggests withdrawal and reinforcement request," she reported. "However, tactical analysis indicates we can achieve mission objectives with acceptable losses." Zethkar's 4 eyes widened in shock. Acceptable losses against a force this large was impossible. His people had strict rules about such things. You never fought unless you had at least equal numbers, and preferably twice as many ships as the enemy. Anything else was not war, but suicide. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display showing all the enemy positions. His face showed no fear or worry, just the concentrated look of someone solving a difficult puzzle. "Commander Voss, in your experience, what would Keth Hari Doctrine recommend here?" he asked. "Immediate withdrawal," Zethkar replied without hesitation. "Regroup with additional forces. Return with overwhelming superiority." His voice carried the certainty of someone who had never lost a battle by following proper military procedures. "Interesting," Morrison said, and turned to speak to his crew. "Sergeant Davis, how long until your Marines are ready for deployment?" "Sir, we have been ready since we left port," Davis replied with a smile that showed his teeth in a way that made Zethkar uncomfortable. The human began giving orders that made no sense to a trained military mind. Instead of withdrawing to safety, They were going to split their small force into even smaller groups. Instead of waiting for reinforcements, they were going to attack immediately. Instead of engaging the pirates in open battle, where superior numbers would matter, they planned to use the asteroid field for cover and coordinate strikes on multiple targets at once. "This is suicide," Zethkar protested to Dr. Morgan, who was monitoring everything from the science station. "Your people will be slaughtered. You have 8 ships against 34. The mathematics of war are very simple, and they do not favor survival." Dr. Morgan looked up from her instruments with that same calm expression all the humans seemed to wear. "Commander, has anyone ever told you about human military history?" she asked. "I assume it involves losing battles until superior species arrive to help," Zethkar replied. "Actually, it involves winning battles we had no business winning," Morgan said. Her smile was sharp and cold. "We have had quite a lot of practice at being outnumbered." Zethkar watched in growing amazement as the humans implemented their insane battle plan. Morrison's ship disappeared into the asteroid field along with 2 others, vanishing from sensors as if they had never existed. Brooks coordinated the remaining vessels into what looked like a standard attack formation, but Zethkar could see that something was different about how they moved. The pirates reacted exactly as expected, forming up their superior numbers to crush the smaller human force. It was a textbook response that should have ended the battle before it really began. The Korath ships were well armed and had experienced crews who had been raiding shipping lanes for years. Lieutenant Carter began talking into her communication device, speaking quickly in human military language that the translator could barely keep up with. She was coordinating something complex, tracking multiple targets and updating attack plans in real time. Her primitive computer systems somehow managed to process battlefield information faster than Zethkar's own advanced equipment. The first sign that this was not going to be a normal battle came when 3 pirate ships on the edge of their formation simply exploded. There had been no visible weapons fire, no energy beams or missile trails. One moment they were there, the next they were expanding clouds of debris and superheated gas. "How is this possible?" Zethkar demanded, staring at his sensor readings. The explosions had come from inside the asteroid field, but his instruments showed no human ships in that area. They had been tracking empty space just seconds before the attacks. Morrison's voice came over the communication channel, calm and professional. "Kinetic penetrators deployed from concealed positions," he reported. Beginning Phase 2 of the engagement. More pirate ships began dying, picked off one by invisible attackers. The Korath formation started to break apart as captains tried to figure out where the attacks were coming from. Some turned to run, others tried to charge toward the main human force, and a few attempted to hide behind larger asteroids. Dr. Morgan noticed Zethkar's confusion and tried to explain. "We have been in this system for 3 days, Commander. Did you think we spent all that time just waiting?" "You have been here for 3 days," Zethkar repeated slowly. The mission briefing had said they would arrive and immediately engage the pirates. No one had mentioned any advanced preparation. Sergeant Davis's voice crackled over the communication system from somewhere inside the asteroid field. "Marine boarding teams in position. Targets acquired and locked." Zethkar realized that while he had been thinking of this as a simple training exercise, the humans had been planning and preparing for actual war. What happened next would change everything Zethkar thought he knew about warfare. The humans did not just fight the pirates, they hunted them like predators stalking prey through a dark forest. Captain Morrison's ships moved through the asteroid field with impossible precision, appearing from nowhere to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing back into the rocks and debris. The weapons that Zethkar had dismissed as primitive during the demonstrations proved to be terrifyingly effective when used by people who truly understood war. The simple kinetic rounds punched through pirate armor like it was made of paper, and the basic energy cannons carved enemy ships apart with surgical precision. It was not the weapons that made the difference, but the minds that controlled them. Lieutenant, Carter sat at her station, coordinating the entire battle with the cold efficiency of a machine built for killing. Her computer systems tracked 17 different targets simultaneously, updating attack vectors and escape routes in real time. The technology was simple compared to Kethari equipment, but somehow it processed battlefield data faster and more accurately than anything Zethkar had ever seen. 3 more pirate vessels died in explosions that lit up the darkness of space. The attackers were still invisible, striking from concealed positions and disappearing before return fire could find them. The Korath captains were experienced fighters who had faced military forces from a dozen different species, but they had never encountered anything like this systematic destruction. "How are they doing this?" Zethkar demanded as another enemy ship broke apart under concentrated fire. "Their technology is inferior to ours. Their numbers are inadequate. This should not be possible." Dr. Morgan looked up from her monitoring station with that same calm expression she had worn throughout the battle. "You are thinking like a Kethari commander. You fight to win battles. Humans fight to win wars." "What does that mean?" Zethkar asked, frustrated by these cryptic human sayings. "It means we do not just defeat enemies," Morgan replied. "We break them so completely that they never want to fight us again." Admiral Brooks coordinated the overall strategy with the calm precision of someone conducting a musical performance. He was not just destroying pirate ships randomly, but systematically, dismantling their entire operation. Supply vessels were being captured intact, communication networks were being jammed and subverted, and escape routes were being cut off with surgical precision. The pirates tried to rally their remaining forces, forming up their ships for a coordinated counterattack. It was a textbook maneuver that should have overwhelmed the smaller human force through sheer numbers and concentrated firepower. Any civilized military would have been forced to retreat or face destruction. Instead, the humans did something that violated every principle of honorable combat that Zethkar had learned in 30 years of warfare. They ignored the rules completely. Sergeant Davis led his Marine boarding parties through the wreckage of disabled pirate ships like a plague of destruction. His soldiers did not just defeat their enemies, they terrorized them. Pirates who had faced down regular military forces from multiple species broke and ran when confronted by humans who fought as if their lives depended on every single engagement. The boarding actions were not clean military operations but brutal close quarters. Combat where humans used every advantage they could find. They moved through ship corridors in small groups, communicating with hand signals and covering each other with practiced efficiency. When they encountered resistance, they did not try to capture prisoners or minimize damage to enemy property. Davis himself led the assault on the pirate command ship, a converted military cruiser that should have been impossible to take by boarding action. Zethkar watched through intercepted security cameras as the human sergeant fought his way through armed defenders with nothing but determination and superior tactics. The sergeant moved like he had been born for this kind of fighting, using his environment as a weapon and turning every corridor into a death trap for his enemies. His Marines followed his lead, advancing through the ship with relentless efficiency that spoke of countless hours of training for exactly this situation. One of the pirate captains tried to surrender his ship, broadcasting the traditional codes. That meant he was giving up and requesting mercy. In civilized warfare, this would have ended the fighting and begun negotiations for prisoner exchange and reparations. Davis responded by blowing a hole in the ship's bridge with explosives. "This is not warfare," Zethkar whispered in horror as he watched the systematic destruction. "This is something else entirely." "No!" Captain Morrison's voice cut through the communication channel. "Warfare is what those pirates did to the civilian transports they have been raiding. This is justice." The remaining pirate ships tried to scatter and escape, abandoning their formation and their wounded comrades in a desperate attempt to save themselves. It was the smart tactical decision that any reasonable commander would make when faced with impossible odds. The humans pursued every single fleeing vessel. Admiral Brooks issued orders with mechanical precision, directing his ships to intercept. escape routes, and coordinate pursuit vectors. There would be no survivors to spread word about what had happened here, no witnesses to warn other pirate groups about human capabilities. Lieutenant Carter tracked each enemy ship as it tried to run, calculating intercept courses and optimal firing solutions. Her voice remained calm and professional as she called out target designations and attack priorities, as if she was organizing supplies instead of orchestrating the complete annihilation of an enemy force. The last pirate ship died in a brilliant explosion that briefly outshone the system's star. The battle was over, and the humans had achieved something that should have been impossible. They had destroyed a force 4 times their size without losing a single vessel. Zethkar stared at the tactical display showing nothing but debris fields, where the pirate fleet had been. In his 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like what these soft-looking creatures had just accomplished. The final phase of the battle began when the surviving pirates attempted their last, desperate gambit. 15 ships remained from their original fleet of 34, and their captains decided to group together for one final coordinated attack. It was exactly what military doctrine taught in such situations: concentrate remaining forces and try to punch through enemy lines to escape. Captain Morrison watched the enemy formation take shape on his tactical display and did something that made no sense to any civilized warrior. He ordered his ships to retreat. The human vessels broke off their attacks, scattered to the edges of the system, and apparently fled from the superior pirate force. Zethkar felt a moment of relief mixed with disappointment. Finally, the humans were showing proper military sense and withdrawing from an impossible fight. But then he noticed that their retreat pattern was strange, almost like they were moving to predetermined positions rather than simply running away. The pirates saw the human withdrawal as their chance for victory and pressed their attack. Their ships accelerated toward the center of the system, where they could regroup and then jump to faster-than-light travel. For a few minutes, it looked like they might actually escape to fight another day. Then Lieutenant Carter's voice cut through all communication channels with deadly calm. Kinetic bombardment solutions locked and ready, firing on Commander's authorization. The asteroids that the humans had been hiding behind suddenly revealed their true nature. What Zethkar had assumed were natural chunks of rock began moving with impossible speed, accelerating toward the pirate formation like guided missiles. But these were not missiles. They were entire asteroids turned into weapons of mass destruction. The impacts came at nearly the speed of light, hitting the pirate ships with the force of nuclear explosions. Vessels that had survived concentrated energy weapon fire and kinetic rounds simply ceased to exist, vaporized by impacts that released more energy than small stars. The remaining pirates scattered in panic as their formation disintegrated under bombardment that came from empty space. "Those were natural asteroids," Zethkar whispered in disbelief. "We scanned them 3 days ago. They showed no signs of artificial modification. We hollowed them out and installed mass drivers 72 hours ago," Carter replied without looking up from her control station. "Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy does not know exists." The surviving pirates tried to surrender, broadcasting emergency codes and pleading for mercy. In any civilized conflict, this would have ended the fighting, with negotiations beginning for prisoner exchange and war crimes tribunals. The rules of warfare were clear about how defeated enemies should be treated. Sergeant Davis had different ideas about rules. "No quarter," his voice crackled over the communication system from his position aboard a captured pirate vessel. "These raiders have been preying on civilian transports for 8 months. They burned a colony ship full of families last week. What followed was not a battle, but an extermination campaign. The humans pursued every fleeing vessel with relentless determination, hunting them through asteroid fields and nebula clouds like wolves chasing wounded deer. They disabled escape pods and captured supply ships, systematically destroying every trace of the pirate organization. Admiral Brooks directed the final cleanup operations with the same calm efficiency he had shown. Throughout the entire engagement, His ships moved through the debris fields like scavengers, collecting intelligence data and making sure no enemy survivors were left to carry word of what had happened. The human Marines boarded disabled pirate vessels and secured prisoners, but there was something in their eyes that spoke of justice rather than mercy. These were not soldiers following rules of engagement, but people who had seen too much evidence of what their enemies did to innocent civilians. Dr. Morgan monitored the interrogations from her science station, extracting information about other pirate bases and planned raids. The captured pirates talked freely, terrified by what they had witnessed and eager to cooperate with their captors. Some of them begged to be turned over to more civilized authorities who would treat them according to galactic law. Final casualty report came in over the communication system. 34 enemy vessels destroyed or captured, their base of operations eliminated, their supply network dismantled completely. Human casualties included 3 wounded Marines and 1 damaged fighter craft. No human lives had been lost in the complete destruction of a major pirate fleet. Zethkar stared at the numbers in disbelief. In 4 hours, these humans had accomplished what would have taken a full Kethari battle fleet, weeks of careful planning and overwhelming force. They had done it with inferior technology, smaller ships, and weapons that any proper military would have dismissed as obsolete. But they had also done something else that disturbed him even more than their tactical brilliance. They had fought, without honor, without rules, without any consideration for the civilized conventions that made war bearable. They had pursued a beaten enemy to complete destruction and shown no mercy to those who surrendered. Commander Morrison appeared on the main display screen, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from the fighting. His expression was calm, but Zethkar could see something cold and final in his eyes. Report filed with Galactic Council Command, Commander Voss. I believe this concludes your evaluation of human military capabilities. The pirate base had been a converted asteroid mining facility, hidden in the outer system where normal patrols would never find it. The humans had located it within hours of arriving and systematically destroyed every piece of equipment, every supply cache, and every escape route. They had not just won a battle, but eliminated an entire criminal organization. Lieutenant Carter was already analyzing intelligence data from the captured computers, tracking down other pirate cells and criminal networks throughout the sector. The humans were not content with solving one problem, but were preparing to hunt down every associated threat. Sergeant Davis reported that his Marines had secured the main pirate base and were preparing to destroy it completely. There would be nothing left for other criminals to salvage or use, no infrastructure that could be rebuilt or repurposed. The humans believed in solving problems permanently. As Zethkar prepared to return to his own ship, he realized that everything he thought he understood about warfare had been wrong. He had spent his career fighting civilized battles against civilized enemies with agreed-upon rules and acceptable outcomes. The humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting for survival against a universe that wanted them dead, and they had learned lessons that no other species seemed to understand. In the days that followed the complete destruction of the pirate fleet, Zethkar found himself spending more time aboard the human ships, trying to understand what he had witnessed. The humans treated him with respect and answered his questions, patiently, but he could sense that they were holding back important information about their true nature. Captain Morrison invited him to share meals in the officers' dining area, where the humans ate simple food and spoke casually about the battle, as if it had been routine training exercise. They discussed tactics and logistics with the same tone other species used to talk about weather or sports, as if orchestrating the complete annihilation of 34 enemy vessels was just another day at work. Lieutenant Carter showed him detailed analysis of the battle, breaking down every decision and explaining the reasoning behind their unconventional tactics. Her presentation was clear and logical, but it revealed a way of thinking about warfare that was fundamentally different from anything Zethkar had learned in military academy. The humans did not think in terms of winning or losing individual. engagements, but about achieving long-term strategic objectives. They planned not just for the immediate battle, but for all the battles that would never happen, because their enemies would be too broken to fight again. Dr. Morgan spent hours explaining human military history, showing him records of conflicts that stretched back thousands of years. Every war seemed to involve humans fighting against impossible odds and somehow finding ways to win through superior planning, better tactics, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. One afternoon, as human salvage crews worked to process the captured pirate vessels, Zethkar found himself alone with Dr. Morgan in the observation deck overlooking the debris field. The view was beautiful in a terrible way, with streams of metal and debris catching starlight like cosmic jewelry made from the remains of defeated enemies. "I do not understand," he admitted to her. "Your technology is clearly inferior to ours. Your ships are smaller and less heavily armed. Your weapons have less range and lower power output. By every measure that matters in warfare, you should have been destroyed in the first few minutes of combat." Dr. Morgan poured herself a cup of the bitter black liquid that humans called coffee. The smell was harsh and unpleasant to Kethari senses, but she seemed to find it comforting. "Commander, may I ask you about your home world?" she said. "Kethar is a paradise," Zethkar replied automatically. "Abundant natural resources, favorable climate conditions, few dangerous predators. We developed advanced civilization quickly and efficiently because our environment supported rapid population growth and technological development." "Earth is what we call a death world," Morgan said quietly. "Hostile climate with extreme weather, patterns, limited resources that must be fought over constantly, and everything on the planet is evolved to kill everything else. We spent 200,000 years learning how to survive in an environment that wanted us dead." She gestured toward the viewport where human ships moved with deadly grace through the wreckage. "You fight battles, Commander. You have honor codes, established rules, accepted practices that make warfare predictable and manageable. We fight wars. We have only one rule that matters: win at any cost." "But your technology," Zethkar protested, still trying to understand how superior numbers and weapons had proven useless, "is designed by a species that had to make tools sharp enough to kill predators 10 times our size, build shelters that could withstand storms capable of destroying mountains, and develop medicines to treat diseases that could wipe out entire populations," Morgan explained. "We do not build the most advanced technology in the galaxy. We build technology that works when everything else fails." Captain Morrison joined them at the observation window, his uniform clean but his eyes still holding that cold calculation that Zethkar had learned to associate with human commanders. "Making life and death decisions. The paperwork is complete, Commander Voss. The Galactic Council has been informed that the pirate threat in this sector has been permanently eliminated." "What will humans do when you join the Council officially?" Zethkar asked. "What are your intentions toward the other member species?" "The same thing we have always done," Morrison replied without hesitation. "Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Fight those who prey on the innocent. Win every battle we have to fight. And if someone threatens humanity directly," Zethkar pressed, needing to know what these creatures would do if they were truly cornered. Morrison's expression did not change, but something deadly and final flickered in his eyes like fire burning behind ice. "Then they will learn why humans are the only intelligent species on our homeworld that survived long enough to reach the stars." Dr. Morgan finished her coffee and stood up from her chair. "Commander Voss, humanity appreciates your thorough evaluation of our capabilities. We look forward to working with the Kethari Empire as allies and partners in maintaining galactic peace and security." As Zethkar prepared to transfer back to his own vessel for the journey home, he realized that his entire understanding of military power had been fundamentally wrong. He had believed that superior technology and overwhelming force were the keys to victory in any conflict. The humans had taught him that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was not advanced technology or powerful ships, but the mind of a species that had evolved to survive by any means necessary. They fought not with honor or according to established rules, but with the cold determination of creatures who understood that second place in war meant extinction. His final report to the Galactic Council would be brief but decisive. Humanity possessed military capabilities that exceeded all reasonable expectations. They should be granted immediate full membership and offered advisory positions in Council defense forces. Most importantly, under no circumstances should any member species consider making humans their enemy. The Council approved humanity's membership application unanimously after reading his report. Nobody wanted to discover what would happen if they voted no. Years later, when young Kethari officers asked Zethkar about his encounter with human forces, he would tell them about the day his understanding of warfare had been completely shattered. "I thought I knew battle," he would say. "I had fought across multiple star systems, commanded great fleets, conquered entire worlds. Then I watched humanity unleashed in combat, and I realized I had been playing children's games while they had been perfecting the art of war itself."